Good morning. My name is Robert Schmid, Deloitte Digital's Chief IoT Technologist, also known as Mr. IoT. And this week on Coffee with Mr. IoT, my co-host Rachel Moore and I talking with Peter Marx, GE Digital's Evangelist, and we're going to talk about all kind of fun topics in Peter's background. Peter, welcome to our show. Thank you for joining us,
Peter.
Yeah, how are you, Peter?
Yeah, I'm very, very pleased to be here.
We're happy to have you. Give us a little bit of your background, Peter. I think you have a very interesting one based on the last little offline chat we just had.
I have a what I would call a nicely branded one. My background is basically I started in the medical world, writing software for imaging and biomedical research, and then one day I figured out that actually you could go and use the same computer graphics techniques to go do more interesting things like entertainment. So I went to go work with Apple and QuickTime, and from there into video games, and have migrated through a whole bunch of different industries to end up as a CTO for a big city, Los Angeles.
Sorry, say that again? You said a CTO for a big city.
Big city. Well, the second biggest city. You know, there's one bigger city in the United States, but Los Angeles is, I don't know, large. 465 square miles of city, and it's got one of the world's biggest ports. It's got one of the world's biggest airports. It's got the biggest utility company.
Wow.
It's sort of a famous traffic, so we say challenge. How about that? And a whole bunch of other interesting things. It's sort of a technologist dream, if you will.
So from video games to CTO of a city, help me understand, how does that work? And do you just play SimCity all day?
Oh, it's funny because I do think of, when I took the job working for the mayor, one of the things that we talked about was that this is the first time in reality that somebody would actually be able to work on a real-life version of SimCity, and without the Godzilla.
So, tell me, this is also a big shift going from private company to being in public service. How was that shift? I'm just curious, and we'll get to Predix in a second here. I mean, we just actually saw each other this week at Predix Transform. You guys had a huge show, which was very successful, and we met there. But there's something about doing public service that I always have a lot of respect for. And so tell us about this. I mean, what's different? What was great? What were the challenges that are different from working in private sector?
Well, in the private sector, you get a bunch of people together and you say, I want to go there, and you go there. In the public sector, you get a bunch of people together and say, I want to go there, and then we talk about what the meaning is of going there. And we talk about the policy, and we talk about whether we're able to get there and stay there for 100 years. All of that sort of thing, if you will. And the public sector is, in some ways, more complicated than the private sector. It's much more diffuse, much more, it's not in any one person's control. And it's a lot harder, if you will, to go and say, as somebody, I tend to like to just want to go do things. It's really hard to want to go do things in the public sector. Whereas in the private sector, you go do it.
So I know Kristen Russell very well. She was the CIO of Colorado, state of Colorado, and so I realized that job is not a political job, right? You got appointed because of your background rather than politically. Where do you draw the line of policy versus content, and how does that work? I'm just curious.
Well, so the mayor's office is a temporary office on top of a permanent government, and so when you have all these different overlapping things, and so there's a lot of policy discussions that are happening these days in cities. Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, privacy, security, body-worn cameras, IoT, all these different ones. And as the senior technology person for a big city, those are the things that I worry about. At the same time, I'm really interested in actually just making life better, just full-on, straight-out better. And so, in LA, some people have noticed that there's sometimes traffic. And so anything that reduces the pain around traffic, safety. We could take anything, right? Sustainability, energy, money, food, housing, all the rest of it. Let's just use traffic, for example. One of the really irritating things about traffic is when you run into things that you didn't know about. So I really like having really practical things. So I did a data sharing deal, for example, with all the map makers like Google, TomTom, and so on, where we shared with them all of the road construction, so that these apps would simply guide you around road construction. Really straightforward, not a policy discussion, but something that 2 million people every single day are using.
So Peter, I don't know if this was you, but I just want to say thank you for giving me Lyft and Uber at LAX. Me going to LAX all the time. That was like, hooray. So thank you for that. So now, tell us about your new job. You changed, I don't know, is it a couple of weeks ago, a month ago? How long have you been with GE now?
I have been with GE, I have to think about this. I have been with GE for 2 weeks. So actually, this is the end of my 3rd calendar week.
So tell us about it. I'd love to hear what made you go there. I have an idea, but I'd love to hear it from you. And how did you, just tell us about Predix Transform from this week. I really had a good time there. I met a lot of interesting people, including yourself. And what really came out for me is the dedication that GE has behind digital. I mean, it's really, really amazing to me to see how a company like GE really has made the shift towards digital, and not just in how they are with their customers, but actually how you live and breathe your own business. So congrats on that. But back to you. I'd just love to hear what made you make that shift, and tell us a little bit about it. Yeah.
So, so I think you kind of hit it, actually, which is that GE is one of the few companies in the world that has the, well, if you will, the heft and depth and ability to go and actually transform life. I'm still very interested in cities. Still very interested in how do you take our world and make it into a better place in all the boundaries of it. And so when Harel asked me if I would join GE, the answer was very simple. Of course, absolutely. It really, not only was he a very compelling figure, but the fact that GE has the ability to go and touch so many of their lives, and frankly make the world more efficient, make the world a safer place, make it a sustainable place, and there's another really rare opportunity. And so with Predix, Predix is, the proposition is very simple. If you take all of the big spinning machines and systems that hide in the background that provide you with energy, water, transportation, airplanes going through the sky and all the rest of it, and you started to connect them to the cloud and start to actually make them work with data analytics, then you're able to do things you just simply were never able to do before. You're able to go and handle a system as a system. And so, the promise of something like Predix is pretty overwhelming.
So I'm curious, you said you were talking about Los Angeles and you were talking about kind of the infinite use cases that make technology, or that technology is enabling for better societies. Now you've moved back to the commercial side.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see where commercial, without those boundaries, without those restraints of the bureaucracy, where do you see the next steps where it's going to be enabling our lives to be better? Just something cool that you're excited about.
Well, maybe a really cool one is that, how many times have you gone to a hospital, for example, or to the doctor's office and have to wait? Or you ever, doctor's office, imaging is in, all everything's always perfectly aligned to the schedule? And the answer, of course, is not, right? But if you go and say, okay, let's actually take a hospital. Let's actually take all the equipment inside that hospital, make it easier to find, figure out how to do maintenance, and servicing, and it doesn't impact patients. How do we actually have a more connected schedule with the management of the hospital? And suddenly, people don't have to wait. And it's a really, really simple concept. It's not possible to do it because hospitals are these big collections of things and people and everything else, and nobody knows where everything is and how to manage it because it's something.
Yep. No, I think anything you can do to make my wait time less in the doctor's office would be a huge win, because I can't stand going there for multiple reasons, but that's the number one. Inefficiency just isn't something we should have in today's day and age with technology. So,
Rachel, you and I don't seem to be the most patient people. I know I am not. I have the feeling that we both have this sort of like, gotta go.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Robert. None at all.
So, Peter, I'm curious. We often talk about this, IoT. Would you mind giving me one example where IoT really helped in LA and what you guys did around this? And I'd also like to hear how you use the Internet of Things at home. I don't know where you are right now, if you're in LA or wherever, but I'd like to have one personal and one business example from the city, which would be great. I know you talked about that just before.
Well, so let's use the city one really as a simple example. So LA was the first really big city to go and deploy LED streetlights. And so across LA, 215,000 streetlights have been replaced with mesh networked, connected LED streetlights. No big deal, right? Now, if you think about it, what that means is that suddenly the streetlights themselves are all remotely controllable. Think of it as being like a Philips Hue system, something like that. You have this incredibly large, complicated system where you can use a laptop and control the lighting across an entire city. Not only did it save a ton of money for LEDs, but now the Bureau of Street Lighting thinks that it's just delivering light. Right? It's delivering safe public spaces. And so if you start to say, well, okay, now let's connect the streetlights to the 911 system, for example, I could literally go and say, when somebody calls 911, I can actually make the nearest streetlights start to blink as a really simple example and say, look at this. Let me call attention to this space because there's something bad happening. And so that's a really simple example. 215,000 streetlights, mesh networked, controllable, more efficient, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At home, really simple thing. Our doors are connected via, Zigbee to the internet, right? To a little card that connects to the internet. And so they just didn't know that they're locked. When you walk out the door, I have a little calendar thing that goes into my thing, just tells me the front door is locked. That way I don't have to think about whether I left the door locked or locked. And by the way, if I didn't, then I just hit.
So you talked about the lights in LA. What kind of, that seems like a huge project that seems really hard for a city to tackle, especially one of that size. What's the reality of it? I mean, a lot of times we talk about these really cool things, but what's the actual implication, timeline, cost? It seems like it would be astronomical. Is it true, or?
Yeah, it took about 3 years to replace it. And it was done under a federal grant. Bill Clinton gave us an award for it, which is kind of nice. And it's a big deal. And by the way, all the filmmakers were upset because we literally changed the look of the city. The city doesn't emit as much light. So when you go up on top of the hill, the city looks different today than it did a few years ago. It's a phenomenally big deal. At the end of the day, though, some capex resulted in a dramatically reduced opex for the rest of eternity.
This would only happen in LA, that filmmakers would come back and complain to the city about lights, I think. I gotta love LA for that. So if you'd have to pick one city in the US and one city internationally that's the most technically forward-thinking and advanced, where did you go to get your inspiration?
That's a really hard one. Because cities are a little bit like families. They're all a little messed up in sort of different ways, if you will. And so they each have their own strengths. If you think about what New York is doing with the Link NYC stuff, you think about what Boston's been doing, in terms of, putting things like Wi-Fi and cellular into the subways. There's a lot of different, and obviously Boston started the Office of New Urban Mechanics, which is great. You think about, there's the sort of belief in civic universe that Seattle and Minneapolis are the best run cities in the country. You never hear about them. They're just incredibly well done, right? Minneapolis does incredibly well with things like GIS and everything else. And so there are lessons from kind of everywhere, if you will. I will say that when I launched the IoT Data Portal in LA, which publishes now about 1,100 different data sets, and is being run by this fabulous woman by the name of Lillian Corral. It's the top-rated local data portal in the country. And the city of LA has been #1 or #2 in terms of rankings of #1 digital cities across the entire U.S. for the last couple of years. So I would argue LA is doing pretty well. It didn't do it first, but it's done it pretty well. And then
let me just wrap that idea though. So now they're ranking #1 as a digital city. So what? What are they saying? What's the benefit? Do you think that's going to drive a younger generation to move there and stay there? Is it going to help inspire better education? Like, what's the value prop? All these other cities are behind.
Feisty, Rachel today. Feisty.
That's okay.
Friday, Robert.
I'm totally with it. So there's sort of three benefits, right? So one is you really want to have a transparent, accessible government, right? It's your city. You want it.
Yep.
Full stop. When was the last time you knew where every crime took place? When was the last time you knew where every automobile took place? When was the last time you knew where every building took place? In LA you do.
Wow.
By the way, even every night they publish every parking ticket. So you can write a little app, by the way, saying, what are my chances? Should I pay the meter or should I not? Right?
Now my application tells me when my meter's running out, and I go fill it up right on my phone. So I'm pretty stoked about that in Philadelphia. We may not be the most digital, but as long as I can pay my meter on my phone, I'm happy.
But exactly that started in San Francisco and LA simultaneously, the Express Park stuff. And so it's pretty cool, right? So there's the accessibility and the transparency. The other thing about it is that, look, cities have these big problems. Think about sustainability. Think about urban heat islands, think about energy and water management, especially here in California. And if you don't know where everything is being used, you can manage it. And so these are hugely important things because, look, these cities, right now, you never think about an American city lasting for 1,000 or 2,000 years or 10,000 years. But we're trying to lay down the foundation to build, be resilient and sustainable for the long term. Crazy thoughts, huh?
Crazy thoughts. If you're just joining us, it's Robert Schmid, Deloitte Digital Chief IoT Technologist, and you're watching Coffee with Mr. IoT. Today, Rachel and I are talking with Peter Marx, who is now GE Digital's Evangelist. And with that, Peter, what are you going to take?
His title, by the way, Robert? Like, who comes up with that kind of title? I mean, you have a cool title, don't get me wrong, but Evangelist, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I want to know what you're going to evangelize on. So where are you going to go the next year with GE Predix? I know you guys talked about the roadmap at Predix Transform. Maybe you want to talk about that. I just love to sort of like share with us where your awesome ideas for the next year at GE. Love to hear, whatever you can.
So, okay, so it's really
give us the scoop.
And I just want to point out evangelism started with Guy Kawasaki at Apple, right? And so, Guy was the original evangelist, and so he's still the high priest of evangelism.
Do you know Guy personally?
I used to work at Apple. So, and the thing about evangelism is that, look, with Predix and all of these big ideas, what we're doing is we're building awareness, understanding, and then you say, it's a classic approach, which is let's build awareness. Hey, look at this. There's this amazing thing out here that we can do something. Then you get the whole consideration. I might actually use this, right? And then you go and say, okay, I'm actually going to have intent. I have a problem. I have an airline. I have a hospital. I have a port. I have a city. I have a utility that is falling behind, either competitively or, quite frankly, just because the pressure on us is doing more with less. And suddenly that turns into action. Because if I'm going to use this really interesting platform that comes out of General Electric, one of the world's really great programs, and I'm going to go use it to solve my real world problems because I've never been able to do this before. That's simply it, right? And so GE is making a business out of this. And to a certain degree, they're starting internally, right? They have their own businesses. They have 507 factories, for example, that need to be digitized. Well, that's a small subset of the entire world's problems. And if we could do it in GE first, great. Then we know that it works for us. It will probably work for your company, and then you're going to go use it and propagate it across the rest. Does that help?
I have a follow-on question though. What's the common use case that you're seeing that you're surprised that everyone's not picking up? Like, what's the one that, you know, Robert and I keep talking over and over each week? It kind of is a reoccurring theme that the technology's here.
Right.
We're not waiting on it anymore. It's becoming, you know, not cost prohibitive anymore. So what surprises you the most as far as late adoption or struggling to adopt some of this cool new technology when the use case is right there in front of us?
Well, it may be in front of us because we live in a tech, intellectual, constrained universe. And what happens is that think about what these places are trying to do. I say, hey, I need to connect my jet engine to the internet. And the first thing people think is, oh my God, cybersecurity, right?
Yeah.
IoT started off with Bluetooth beacons and, doorbells and things like that. Now we're talking about turbines. Now we're talking about power plants. And so there's a lot of consideration on cybersecurity, and what you have to do is you have to figure out how to solve the cybersecurity issues and still get all the benefits of actually connecting things to not only each other, but also to the cloud. And so we have a lot of national critical infrastructure is not something that you only connect to the cloud, except that because we're now dealing with the cybersecurity side and we have the paradigms and hosting and everything else, so we're actually able to now consider doing it.
Peter, we have to set the time. We get to 22 minutes and we're just warming up and could talk another 25. But we're coming to the end of Coffee with Mr. IoT, so give us some closing thoughts, something we haven't touched yet that you want to share with us. Yeah.
Give us some juicy secrets. What's coming up really cool that no one else knows about? We want debuts. We want cool stuff. Share.
Look, the whole thing is new, right? The entire thing is new. The mere fact that we're even talking about this is something that we could not have done 2 years ago. We couldn't have done it a year ago. These were things that were just somewhere off and showing up in the movies more than anything else. And now we're in a place where we're actually saying, no, I can actually imagine a world where literally something as dumb as my thermostat is connected all the way to the power plant. And now I can manage the entire energy system in a dynamic way. And that's something that I really thought about every time. Just think about your daily life. When was the last time you thought about the traffic signal, for example, actually talking to your car? Right now, a traffic signal is 3 lights. Right? It's usually change red one, actually. And a traffic signal is technology that dates back to 1868. And it's the thing, right? It talks to a human being driving a machine. Well, the heck with that. Why wouldn't the machine just talk to the infrastructure and let the human being go back to doing something important, like watching Netflix?
They had no problems putting cameras on it, though, so they could take pictures of me as I speed right through it. But that's another topic for another day. Not fun at all.
Yeah. I have to tell you, it's really fascinating to me how lights have become a big topic for citizens. It makes so much sense, but it wasn't the first thing. And it goes back to what we so often talk about. Think big, but start small. And as much as it's 3 years long, a light is probably starting small when you think of other complicated scenarios. And we're doing a project in a county on the East Coast. We had just a periscope, and my colleague called it the Far East, and I looked at him funny. But in any case, it's on the East Coast, and the thing we want to do is we want to put smart lights into bus stops because of actually the same thing, right? Bus stops, we want them to be safe, and there's a lot we can learn from that. So, Peter, I want to say thanks for being here. It looks like our coffee break is coming to a close. Great conversation. Peter Marx, GE Predix Evangelist. Great for sharing with us that this comes actually originally from Apple and Guy Kawasaki. I'm almost envious. I follow Guy actually, and now I follow you, Peter. So it would be great to be up to date. And we hope to have you back sometime. Please join Rachel, Mohrmann, and me next Friday, 9 a.m. Actually, next Friday we're gonna skip. Friday after next week, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, for another Coffee with Mr. IoT. And by the way, if you missed part, join my YouTube channel and you can record it there. With that, Rachel, any closing thoughts or comments?
No, Peter, I'm just excited to see what SimCity takes us.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, take good care. Nice to meet you. Nice to have fun, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you, Rachel. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.